Welcome, everybody. Very much welcome to something new. And as I was writing out to you when I was doing the questions, okay, last month we did the classic, and it was indeed classic. And today we're doing something very contemporary, a lot more experimental, by Naja Maria Aidt. And of course, we are the National Danish Book Club and Literary Event Series, and a collaboration of the Museum of Danish America, Northwest Danish Association, Desiree, and me. And we are made possible with support from the Scandesign Foundation, Danish American Heritage Society, and the University of Washington Scandinavian Studies Department. And we also have promotional partners that include National Foundation for Danish America, Ilverhøj Museum, and National Nordic Museum. Yes, I think that's it. And so we can get started. As I told you, this author, and that's what Desiree was going to talk about, which would have been amazing. She lost a son at when he was 25, and it was a very traumatic and tragic event. She wrote a book about it. And as I wrote here, it's called When Death Takes Something From You, Give It Back. If you read Joan Didion's Grief, you know, it's the same genre. It's a very, very personal book, and for me it was very difficult to read, I must say. But she did a very, very good job of it. And as I also said, she's primarily a poet. So when Desiree gets her interview, we'll know a lot more about her, because Desiree is always very well prepared. And then I sat there with 15 short stories and thought, okay, there's no way we're going to be able to talk about 15. And so I just took the liberty of choosing 5. And I tried to choose 5 that were kind of varied. Not that there's so much variation in her matters and themes and what she likes to write about. It's not like you walk away from that saying, oh, life's one happy day of sunshine. But that's okay, because she obviously has a message. And I hope that in talking about those stories today, we can also find out what she's trying to do, what she's trying to tell us, and whether it's relevant or not for us. So first of all, if you don't want to talk about those stories, tell me which other stories you'd like to talk about, because I would like to kind of say, all right, we've got 50 minutes left, so that's about 10 minutes per story, unless you have another story you'd like to add to my little mix.
Yeah.
And silence reigns. Okay, that's fine. Then let's start with the first one. And as you can see, of course, what is the difference? Well, in medias res, we are jumping right in, and there is no time for long introductions, no time for setting the scene. We are in the middle of the action. And that's why my first question was the same. What, I could have included the heck, is going on here? Where are we? And why are we here? And who is here? And who is the narrator? Let's start with the first one, Pulpia. I don't know if any of you looked it up. It's a geographical location on the western coast of Jutland, facing, you know, the North Sea, which they call the West Sea in Denmark, which is kind of interesting, but it is to the west. So that is their destination on this unhappy journey. And I did not, you know, pick any passages to read this time. I just thought, okay, I'll throw it at you. What do you think of this story? What is going on? What is the bike question? What is it with the dog, the dachshund that kind of gets left in the woods? What is happening between the protagonists, and what is it with this little kid and the first person whose name he was given, the big Sebastian, who looks like a hairy ape, etc. And I should tell you, I read it in Danish, so if I'm translating awkwardly compared to the English version, I'm sorry. So then you'll have to correct me. What do you think? Anybody start out with Pulpia?
Well, I'll start. Of all the stories in the book, I guess I felt I had more of a handle on this story than many of the others. She's a writer that uses a lot of symbolism. And for me, sometimes it was very hard to understand what what those things were. I knew I should, but I didn't. But in this one, I thought that the whole thing of how it begins, where they're coming out of this dark, deep forest into this extremely bright light, was also a symbol for their relationship, in that they came out of this kind of darkness where there were a lot of secrets. They were riding on these rusty old bikes that could have a flat at any minute and fall apart. And they're making their way forward into this light. And then a lot of things come forward in that relationship. And the light of that, putting that light on that relationship, is destructive. Whereas we most often think of it as it's a good thing, you know, and maybe it is a good thing, but it seemed very destructive to all of the people in this. So that I just thought this was one I thought maybe I understood. So I'd like to know what other people thought.
And Netta, can I just break in here and say, okay, you always understand something, and what you understand is just as valid as what everybody else is understanding. Please, there's no right or wrong in literature. There's just a lot of thoughts.
Well, I agree with that, but I would like to know what other people thought when they read this story.
What did you think, everybody? I love your point about coming into the light, and then how does the story end? And it ends in darkness. It was dark. Yeah, it was dark when he and Sebastian come back to the house, and she hadn't even picked up the dog, so that's still out in the darkness in the woods, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so it's kind of like light, dark, light again, or dark light and then darkness. Sorry. Okay, any other thoughts?
Well, I'll just throw out there, just sort of all of the stories seem to deal with coming out of the forest, or being in a forest, or being at a summer home and going on vacation. And I usually think of that as a joyful time, a happy time. And most of these were not. There was a lot of discomfort. Some of it very shocking to me, in terms of how people treated each other. And yeah, so that was just, especially as we're trying to have summer here, or spring, we're still fighting the snow and cold. And there was a lot of that in this book too, in the stories.
Did you think that it left you depressed, or did you think that you saw the glimmer of a hope in her stories? What do you think, for example, here about his disclosures? Like Annette said, all the secrets that come out into the light, is that going to be good, or is it going to be bad? He does say in one place, well, we do have a child together.
I thought it was very cruel the way he did it, his approach in how he confessed. And I don't have a lot of hope for that relationship. And I don't think the child was the answer for them.
No, I don't see that there's any hope. I mean, when someone is guilty and confesses, it probably assuages the guilt of the confessor. There is a time that you shut your mouth, but she got even because Sebastian was the name of the Pulsa vendor, and that's the name of her son. So I guess it was tit for tat.
Remember where he's lying down with his eyes closed and she stands over him hatefully and looks at him with hate in her eyes? Mm-hmm. Do you see that hate in any other passages of that story? In other words, do you see that? Is there any love? Is there any kind of emotional I guess kind of unification between the two, or is it all hatred now? Sandra,
it's all hatred. I will say the father does seem to take good care of Sebastian. I mean, that's the only relationship that is maybe somewhat okay.
Yeah.
And what about mother's relationship with Sebastian, Sandra? How did you
Well,
see
I think
that?
she also does, to the best of her ability and in different ways.
What I really felt throughout this was there is so much aggression and tension, and it's not just about between the adults. It might stem from that, but aggression towards the kid and dog, and like when the adults screw up, or the adults can't perform or can't figure out how to live the life they're in, the weaker around them will pay and suffer.
And I think we see that quite clearly. One, he throws away the bike, yellow bike. And of course, I agree with you in that. I mean, the bikes are rusty and they will have a flat tire, and that's kind of their way through life. And they are going back into the darkness, and the bike stays out in the woods, right? So there's floundering of that relationship with a bike, which gives you freedom. Bikes in Denmark are definitely very often a symbol of freedom. When you have a bike, you can go anywhere. You have a song that says, I'm so happy with my bike, it can take me anywhere. And, you know, and kids learn to sing that one. So that is what it is now. He is confined to sitting behind his dad on his bike and being carried. The dog is tied out in the woods, left kind of, I don't know, just thrown overboard, because all of a sudden they don't have room for that. But notice it is a triangular story. Did you think about that? The darkness, light, darkness, everything is in triangles. Man, woman, child, and then you have child, dog, bike. If you look at that story, you can kind of structure it and dissect it and turn it into a whole big slew of triangles that all interact. Now, my huge question here is, what are triangles usually in literature? Have you ever thought about that? How many stories you read with triangles in them? Thought about why that is? No?
No.
No.
Could it be something like the Father, Son, Holy Ghost, and eventually wind up with redemption?
That might be one of the stars, right? Adam, Eve, and the snake, you know, there's so much in our life that is triangle. And I think this is just a great example of one of those. And because of that, you could also say there's the triangle, him, her, and the little sister who has a better body, etc., and has skills that I don't want to get into. But it's all within. And usually triangles, you have to look at them as with very sharp corners. They are not nice figures. They're not circles. So that usually means conflict. So they symbolize conflict in literature. And that's why, you know, if you take kind of yellow story or, you know, yellow magazine and you read a story, anybody can write a story with a triangle. The doctor, the nurse, and the patient. Just to give an example. Okay. All right.
I have a question. I couldn't understand when they throw the child's bike away, the comment, or somebody thinks maybe they'll think we murdered something.
Yeah.
That just seemed to come out of nowhere. I mean, why would that be the first thing that popped into your head?
Anybody? I think it's because they are at that point on the edge of an abyss, and who knows what's going to happen to their relationship. Not that the child is going to be murdered. I just think it's a symbol of the fact that those are her thoughts. We are really at a shipwreck in our relationship right now. Things are going really bad. And notice the whole thing starts because she can't find her way. Ooh, talk about symbolism, right? Oh, she's lost in the woods, and she has a man and a child, and he's equally lost. So there's nobody who finds his or her way in this story. They're all lost. And when they come back, then what? In the middle of the night? Okay, dog out in the woods, bike out in the woods. How are they going to find it? They can never go back. They can't retrace their steps, which means they can't mend all those chasms that have happened in their relationship.
Seems to be a theme in Danish literature, huh? This is like the third story you guys read about. who can't find their way around.
So what's wrong with us, Desiree, right?
I know, what's wrong with the Danes?
What's wrong with the Danes? All right, those were the famous last words. Next story. Unless, I mean, and this is the point where you just jump in and say, okay, I need to say something. Next one is called black currants. Now, as an avid black currant cultivator, I don't know how many black bushes in my garden. I thought this was a very appropriate story. Have you ever had black currant jam?
Yeah.
Mhm.
Those of you who haven't, it's amazing. It's really tart, and my husband hates it because it's way too tart, and he's not Danish. But of course, you have to grow up with it, and then you like it, which is why I have my blackcurrant bushes. And right now, I make cassis out of them, and he really likes them
Yeah.
because that's alcohol, so it's not
Mhm.
jam. So we're very happy together still. No triangles there. So tell me about that story. It's a very, very different story. Two female protagonists. What did you make of it?
Oh, yeah.
I didn't understand that at all when you started to explain to me that they were possibly lesbians. I didn't get that at all.
Yeah.
And when the symbol of the chicken was an abortion, I didn't get that. I even read it again and I thought, oh God, am I getting stupider? I just didn't see it. So please explain
You're
that
never
story to me.
stupid. I mean, there's never anything about being stupid. Come on, what do you think? Yes, the
I
bushes, the sun, she doesn't want to stop. What's wrong with Helle? Why does the other protagonist have so many thoughts and dreams about this man that she knew?
Yeah.
And what is it with this darn chicken that they completely waste that goes to the, oh yeah, and then the farmer's son who has a few things going on as well.
Yeah.
What is happening? Nobody wants to talk about sex. This is all about sex, right?
Oh, I don't want to talk about the kid. That was so demented.
I do. What were you going to say?
I was gonna say I didn't really know what the story was about. It just seemed like the end of a relationship. I don't know why I thought it was the end, but it didn't seem like they knew where to go. And because one of the two people in the relationship was dreaming about other loves or interests, it just didn't seem like that person was totally invested in the relationship.
Well, were both of the women not necessarily invested in a lesbian relationship? I mean, the other one's pregnant, right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
And how did she
do that by
pregnant?
herself? So, yeah. And I agree. I went through this and I kept saying, okay, that black sheep has to mean something. It's black. Okay, and the blackberries. Okay, what does that mean? And why? I was doing that throughout this entire story. I was, well, what is that supposed to mean? And why can't I figure it out? And what, you know, the white chicken. And to me, the one thing I think I got out of this story was it was talking about commitment. And I felt that because I felt nobody in this story was committed to anything. They may have been in a lesbian relationship, but they weren't committed to it. And they weren't really committed to finishing cooking that chicken. And they were, I know there was like a lot of lack of commitment in this story.
That's a great, the little boy, he was committed to the sheep, you could say. And so maybe that was
He had to drag it in the barn. I don't know.
I guess I saw it as a story of sadness.
Yes.
That I didn't even see that these people were in a relationship. I saw them as roommates, you know, because of how little there was connection between them. And they didn't even really know how to take care of each other or meet each other's needs. I mean, you know, and that if she had an abortion and was pregnant and the other one didn't even know about it, it's like there was no communication here, total absence of that. And yet it's sadness, yet the what we put on as a show for our neighbors, that we continue to be friendly and everything is okay. Life goes on and we pretend. And so there's a sadness and this pretense that to me took over the story.
Good. I agree. You know what I was thinking about was, okay, so they're out there picking together, they don't talk. And Hille is very invested in picking the berries because that distracts her. But then the protagonist, the narrator, she goes back and she says, oh, I remember when she got that faded tattoo. Okay, they've known each other for a long time. We were drunk then. Oh, we were also drunk on another occasion. We were drunk a lot, which is fine. I mean, there's no judgment there. It's just a fact. And then she goes into her own room. So that's where you're, Andrea, I mean, roommates, her own room and Hille's room, they are not sharing a room. So they're living together and we don't know if they have a lesbian relationship. We don't know if they are, you know, even liking each other at this point. They are drinking coffee together. They still don't talk. So to me, it's like, okay, it's about a relationship where people are not communicating those things that matter. And that's why I thought the chicken that doesn't get cooked is just another thing that falls by the wayside. Just like that abortion, the fetus that she's going to lose through the abortion, it's not important. And she doesn't want it. They don't want the chicken. They eat onions and tomatoes. They eat something very simple and very earthy. And yet it doesn't restore their relationship. So that's how I see it. I see it as, yes, a story of two people who are unable to communicate about that which is important. And the fact that they're doing such an everyday thing as picking berries. Have you ever picked berries with someone? Okay, it's twice as fast and twice as cozy because you can chit chat. They're not. So taking an everyday situation saying, this is pretty hopeless. We're not going anywhere. And they throw out chicken. And notice the farmer and his wife, they have a really nice relationship. They are so nice. It's totally sarcastic when she says that. They're so nice. It's as if they're floating up here with this little facade of niceness. They take a nap every day. They're, you know, good, solid people.
Also, this is the first story where I mean, it's not the first story throughout the book, but in this story especially, I felt the writer was playing with me. She likes to not make you sure whether the person who's in there is a male or a female. And when this story started, I assumed it was a man narrating the story until he talked about his dress. Now, I'm not saying it can't still be a man, but at that point, I thought she was telling me it's a woman. This happened to me multiple times in this book, where I was not, she's playing with the reader of how do you identify the sex of an individual? I think it's an interesting thing she's doing.
And that's what I wanted to touch upon, because I think some of our confusion is about the unreliable narrator, right? Because, for instance, when you read about when she says that, oh, I was so drunk, maybe I wasn't that drunk. You have a feeling that she actually knows exactly what was going on, but she's just saying, you know, yeah, I don't know because I was so drunk. So I think that's why we also get confused, because we know, we have a feeling like she's not completely truthful, and there are multiple glimpses of, yeah, that unreliable narrator.
And I think a great example is when she says, oh, and I was so surprised when she kissed the tattoo guy on the mouth. Was she or wasn't she? Oh yeah, but we were drunk, like you said. That's right. That's a great excuse. All right. That'll just excuse everything. So a very unreliable narrator and a very unreliable relationship in that story. And yet she makes lovely jam. And like I said, okay, I highly recommend it. Licking her fingers and very sticky. Yes. Okay. Next story, everybody. I'm sitting here keeping an eye on my clock. It's the first time I've ever done that. That is Torben and Maria. Okay. Heidi, what do you want to say?
That it was an incredibly sad story. And I didn't like reading it. I read it twice because I didn't have the questions at first, and then I read it again and looked more specifically for the things that you had noted. And it didn't get any better reading it a second time. It was just very sad and hard to read.
What did you find saddest or just very sad?
Oh, I'm going to call him Torben, because that's how I pronounced it myself. How Torben was treated. I thought Maria was a sad character, she's also an adult who made choices that led her to that point in her life. Torben, he was the result of her choices. And he seemed like he was a sweet boy, and he was so tiny, not even 2 years old, or just turned 2 years old in the story. And how abusive she was, and how uncaring the childcare workers were. It was just, it was just so sad.
What struck me was it's 3 generations of abuse. We don't know that the grandmother did, but she says if you hit him on his bottom, it won't show. And then Maria is abusive to him, and then he bites and hits his classmates. So you can already see him learning to do the same thing.
To me, the most shocking part was that the social welfare people would just dismiss it because who is he? He's like a nothing kid, a throwaway kid. And that was very disturbing.
Yeah.
He's in kindergarten, so the system of caretaking, he's actually he shouldn't really be there, but because you go to kindergarten, which it's called 3, and up to that point you're in another institution. So he's probably the other institution called it Vuggestue, where you can play with other kids and be socialized. So they're not social workers, they're so-called pedagogues. Do you feel that they should have interfered? Because remember what they said was, well, Maria seems like an okay person, so we're not quite sure why this is happening. And I don't know if you've ever, I mean, I can still remember when my son was in kindergarten and was 3 years old, and they called me and said, he hit somebody else. And I thought, oh, really? So what did that other person do to him? And my gut reaction was, my son is a nice little boy. And so, they usually are very kind of on to this. So why are they not doing anything here?
Yeah, I don't know. In the United States, there's a mandate. So you absolutely have to report suspected abuse. At least in public education you do, and I would imagine in most daycare settings, there is some requirement.
Oh, yeah, there is definitely.
Yeah, so I don't know what made them decide other than he wasn't very likable. And that's not a reason.
But don't you think it's a realistic thing? I mean, don't you think that cute, cuddly little children get treated better than grumpy, nasty little children? I mean, I think they do. It's just natural that you would love that sweet, charming, beautiful child and kind of not want to be around that other one. I remember having feelings like that when friends would come over with these kids that were punching you and throwing things, breaking your stuff. I don't think that's so not realistic. I don't think it's an excuse, but I don't think it's not realistic.
Could be a cultural thing as well, right? That the Danish thing is you don't want to meddle in other people's affairs. And also if she lives in like a social housing situation, her kid won't be the only one with issues. And so that might also factor in, and they're not well staffed, and maybe half of them don't have the proper education, and it's very hard to go through the administrative process and yada yada yada. But I definitely think there is something about, she's a young mom, they feel sorry for her, and also you don't really want to meddle with someone's life, because what if you're wrong? And then who pays the price? The kids do.
And where does this take place? We don't really know, but we've talked an awful lot about regional differences in Denmark, and abuse may get seen and heard and talked about a lot more in the Copenhagen area, but some of those areas in the West, I just get the impression, we don't talk about these things. We don't know that these things exist, even in Denmark.
I agree. I think she's in a small community and people are just, what do we do? But I do want to talk about also, before we leave the story, what about the mountain? What about the man? What about the father? What happened there? And why is she so incredibly resentful of anything? And what about that circle, he says? And what about his role? He's saying, I know where I have you. I want to see you if you can get out of that circle, and you can, and blah, blah, blah. What kind of a guy is he? What do you think has been going on to create this situation where, as you say, it's the child that pays the price?
Well, he's mean too. I mean, he gave him the child the globe, the snowy globe, as an experiment to see what would happen. How would she react? Well, she threw it away and the kid's upset. I mean, he's cruel too. Everybody here is cruel. I mean, that's like the theme of this, and she just pushes it, the author, so that it's just everything all the way around is just cruelty.
I'm not sure if Bjorn, is that how you say his name? I'm not sure. Yeah, the brother. I don't necessarily think that he was a cruel person. He witnessed what was happening between Maria and her son, and he wasn't necessarily helpful, but he gave her the message that he didn't approve of what she was doing. That was my sense about it. And he treated the child nicely as a mom.
I was talking about Rock, who is the father.
Okay.
He's the one that gave him the snow globe.
Yes.
Yeah, Bjorn. And
the Rock.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's how it was translated.
Yeah.
The Danish, it was the mountain, but I mean,
I was wondering about that.
Okay.
No, but I agree with you. Heidi, he's the one who's nice, right? And he's the only one who plays. Look at how she brings up the kid. She sits down in front of the TV, lights a cigarette, watches TV, and then the kid falls asleep and she drags him into bed. So much for any kind of inspiration or I don't know, teaching or illuminating his spirit. No, there's nothing. So yeah, cruelty, except for Bjorn, who kind of gives up and goes off to buy some weed.
Yeah.
Well, is Rock a drug dealer? Is that?
Yeah, I think so.
I mean, but
Yeah.
it's like he's the Rock. We think of a Rock as somebody stable and, structured and hard. And he's really just doing his own thing and using people and used her. And he's anything but a Rock in my boat.
But Andrea, don't you think he's also cruel? Because the
Oh,
way
yeah,
he's an observer. He looks at her misery and says, "Ha, I know where I have you. You're like in a cage."
I see him as a user. He's a user of people because it gets him, his business is as a drug dealer, and he only cares about using people to make his living as a drug dealer.
He's playing a game. It's chess, but it's like Pinocchio's with strings. I don't know what that's called in English, but yeah, he's
Puppeteer.
Yeah, puppeteer, but he's also selling cell phones, anything to, we have a deal, we can do a deal, blah, blah, blah. So he's that kind of a wheeler and dealer, a very, very unsavory person. And that poor little kid, what's going to happen to him? And that, you get the last word. You have to unmute yourself in that.
It's going back. Okay. I think that the difference between the meaning mountain and the meaning of rock as it's translated is significant. I mean, I think in looking at that character and how much power he has, because you can take a rock and throw it away, but you're not going to be able to get rid of him. And so I think that's very interesting that once again, the translation kind of affects the story.
It's a good point.
Great. Oh, that's a great point. Moving on, trip in a car, everybody's favorite family holiday. Yes. What did you think? Is it relatable? Is it horrible? What about those kids? Who do they belong to? Did you kind of figure that out?
Yeah, a bonus family, some kind of.
It seemed like the the oldest child had a different father because
Yeah.
he wanted to stay at his
Mhm.
father's house.
Mhm.
And the youngest one was obviously their baby. And I didn't really know about the kids in the middle.
Did you pick up on Andreas? Andreas. So the oldest is Tobias in Danish.
Yeah.
Tine, then Andreas, and then Brorman, which means brother. I don't know how that was translated. I can't get the book in English. Really annoying. But I would have checked that out. But Tobias is definitely Mia's son.
Mm.
And then the next one, I think Sina, Andreas, and Borman, I think the three little ones are actually their children.
Yeah.
But did you pick up on what is wrong with Andreas?
No.
Did everybody? His behavior? What is he
They were
doing?
all so bad. It was driving
Yeah.
me crazy. Sort of like, thank God I don't have kids.
Oh no. You know, I dreamt last night that I was pregnant with my sixth child and I was so happy. No. So Andreas, he's reading comic books, right?
Mhm.
He's reading
Yeah.
comic books.
Yeah.
Does he look up? Does he communicate? No. Does he run off? What does he do when they get to the ferry? Disappears?
Yeah.
Wanted to see a
What
car.
does he say? Pardon?
He wanted to see a car.
You want to see a car? What does he say when he needs to go pee? If you don't stop now, I'm going to pee on the seat. What does he say when he's hungry? If you don't stop now to give me something to eat, then, you know,
I'm going
I'll
to die of
scream or whatever.
starvation.
Yeah. What is wrong with him?
Well, I thought he suffered from middle child syndrome, you know, that the total lack of attention from the parents because he's a middle kid. But, you know, that's because I'm a middle kid. And I totally related to the car trip with the car full of kids and nobody is happy. And, you know, mom's trying to feed the baby from the front seat and dad's hollering because the weather stinks and he's trying to keep the car on the road. And it's like, oh my gosh, why are we taking this trip? You know, it's supposed to be a summer vacation and the oldest kid doesn't want to be there. They got to drag him out of the house and he wants to leave after 3 days because, you know, he wants to go be with his girlfriend. And it's just like, you know, the work that goes into putting those trips together and nobody really wants to be there because they really don't want to be with each other.
They don't want to be with each other. I think that Andreas is on the spectrum. That's why
Yeah.
I'm saying. I think that he's got,
Okay.
you know, special problems, Heidi.
Yeah, I thought that's what you were getting at, that you think he's on the spectrum and that his behavior is reflecting.
What about the sister then? I think she's worse.
Yeah, I think she's worse.
Yeah.
The way he talks to her mom, how old do you think she is?
Mm,
Between
What-
8 and 15.
Oh,
Well, this took,
And
I have to say, this took me back. I'm the oldest out of 5 kids and with 3 different dads. And this was really like as chaotic as I remember it and unpleasant. And let's pretend and play we are a normal family, which I don't know what is anyway, but and everyone has different needs and there are all these different components of people disliking each other for different reasons and wanting to terrorize a certain member or the whole atmosphere, or you know, it was just I think Aidt has 3 kids of her own. She probably has had different things going on in her private life, and she really captures that like universe, and then she puts them in a car. It can't be more crammed. And then, like you guys say, they really don't like each other. They're there because they have to be. You know, love put kids in circumstances they don't want to be in. Yeah, I think she's in her like mid-30s and that she started having kids very early. That's my guess. Just to answer.
So, yeah, no. So no, I was thinking of Sina actually, how old she is. I think she's like 11 or 12, the way she speaks to her mom. Now give me the money, you know, that kind of very demanding. What? And her mom keeps saying, speak nicely, you know, don't be such a jerk. But also it's the bonus family, right? So we have one child who's not the dad, and we have the others who are questionable. So it's that bonus family thing, which is of course the motley crew of society today. You know, the pattern of society today is that way. And we all know that, and we all have to get used to it. And what the big question for me was, what is the relationship between the two adults? Nikolai, who's chewing nicotine gum very diligently, and the wife, Mia, what are they thinking about? What's keeping them together?
Sex.
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 Yeah. Sex. That's how they get more kids, right? Okay. But sex is keeping them together, and that's where they find their own little kind of haven that they actually have something together. Do you think it's going to work? Are they going to stay together? Are they going to be happy? Is Tobias is going to go home. He's off on his own. He says, I'm out of here. And I got my dad's apartment. Are they going to stay together? Are they going to manage it? What do you think? What are the signs here in this story?
Well, I think they're trying. I mean, they're trying to be a normal family. They're taking their children to their summer house. It's not an easy feat to do what they're doing. So that gives me a little bit of hope that they're putting the effort in, and they're trying to correct their children when they get off the road, when the kids are snotty or whatever. Who knows? Who's to say what makes for a relationship that lasts and what doesn't? My old thing is always, you have to find ways to keep falling in love with that person, because it's so easy to focus on the things that annoy you. What can you find that you like about this person and that you love about them? And then that's how, in my mind, you keep going.
Of course, Andrea, you raised the question, a normal family. Tell me, everybody, what's a normal family? How many of us have a normal family? Brady, your turn. What's a normal family?
Yeah. Take your point. Yeah.
Anybody? Family? What is it? Does a normal family mean happiness? I think that's what I'm getting at, because when I read this story, it oozes unhappiness. And it's almost unbearable, because she so wants it to be a good, oh yes, at the end, oh yes, we're going to have a good vacation, that kind of irrational justification of what they're doing.
But it's also expectations. It's also expectations. And, I just recall driving trips as a child too, and it's getting there. And there's so much anxiety and anticipation in the getting there. And then once you arrive and things settle in and everybody can calm down, because now you're there and you can relax. We're just seeing the really anxious time at this point. They got to get to the ferry, and Nikolai is just, he's consumed with getting to the ferry, and then they're on the ferry and it's on choppy water. And there are all the indications that this is not a smooth going thing, but that's also how things are.
The problem is they'll never get there, because she receives a phone call.
Yes. Well,
do
they just go on with their vacation or not?
They will never get to where she wants to go. I think that's the point, that how no matter how much she wants it, there's always something happening that changes the outlook she has on what a real happy family is. There will always be something thrown at them. I mean, that's the whole family is proves that, right? The way it's put together. At least that's how I read it.
Okay, let me finish with Robert Louis Stevenson. It's better to travel than to arrive. Love that. It just doesn't quite work here. Last story. Okay. Wounds. That is a fascinating story. It's longer. And it's very detailed in a lot of ways. It's also very strange and mysterious. What did you make of that? Who's the protagonist? What's happening? What are these wounds? Are they real? Are they, imagined? What do you think? He meets a British lady and she's middle-aged, so she's not too old. She lost her husband. She really didn't like her husband because he could be quite a pain. So what's going on? How did you read this story?
I read that the reveal was that there's a transgender person.
Yeah.
That's how I finally read it.
And why is that, Linda? Explain.
Well, the wounds were breast operation. The hand that was hurt was from the IV being put in. There were some other wounds that didn't seem to be in the chest level, so I wasn't sure what that was about. But that's the big surprise for me when the he was a she was a he. So that was a surprise element in that story for me.
But at the end, it to me, it seemed like he had killed someone. She had killed someone. And it wasn't an IV thing in the hand, it was a gash in the hand. And I had the feeling that she was a hired killer or something.
Mm. And where did you get that from, Sandra? That's exciting.
At the very, maybe the next to the last sentence, something about killing something about taking a life.
Yeah, but I had that. I mean, I felt like Linda did, that this was a transgender person. And I think the killing is killing the other person you were.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because I've known a couple people who have had the surgeries, and there is a feeling of having gotten rid of someone and become someone else. I mean, it's one of the struggles, I think. God knows there's a lot, but that I think is one of them.
Yeah.
So I agree with Linda. I think that it was a transgender.
So what is the guy doing? So this is where she says at the end, oh, I thought you were a man. And he says, well, yeah, I thought so too, kind of. So what is the author getting? I mean, what is this person doing? It's just a matter of identity. She is finding a new identity in a new city. Why then does she shy away from being with this nice British lady? And then, finally at the end, they kind of have a really good time together. What do you think happens? Is this a happy story? Did we end with our happy story? Or is she still searching for that identity that is hidden behind the wounds? What did you think?
I think this is a happy ending. Because of the last sentences, actually, that when you kill someone, you look differently at those alive. I'm just translating from the Danish here. I'll never grow tired of looking around. Right? That's like, he's traveling, going to London now, looking around because now the world looks so different. And it's just like this, like everything has changed and life is open, and this person is now open to new intryk. Now I can't think in English. Sorry. Impressions. And yeah, so to me, it's a happy ending. Happy endings doesn't have to mean that you meet someone and you fall in love and you spend the rest of your life with them. This was just one step on that personal journey that this person is on.
And the reason I wanted to end with this is, of course, that I wanted to ask that overriding question: are all the stories about finding your identity or figuring out who you are in the relationships that you're in? If we were to be, playing that we're reviewers of these stories, where would be that thread that went through all the stories, tying them together? What would you say is the overall theme of her writing these short stories?
I think that there's what pulls them together is also connected to something I wanted to say about her formal style. It's the inability of people to make connections. And the formal style is, I think it was Annetta alluded to this, how she plays on our assumptions as readers, and sometimes it feels like it does confuse us. And I can't remember, it was the story where the narrator was a man, but I assume because she's a woman writer that the narrator is a woman. And then there's these states of confusion you go to figure things out, and that makes all of the relationships even more difficult because she changes points of view. She changes, in the first story we talked about, she actually refers to the woman as you. I'm addressing you. So there's so much formal style going on that gets in your way as a reader of connecting with these characters, some of whom are really unpleasant, that and that you're not, I don't know that there's a sympathetic character in the entire book. I didn't finish all of the stories, but I'd be surprised based on what I read and what you all said. So I think that's the thematic glue is that inability to make connections, and then her style helps us or forces us to experience that.
That's a very good point, Brady. I mean,
Yeah.
lack of commitment, lack of connections, lack of compassion, lack of empathy. Can we find any more words, right? Towards other people, being in your own little selfish circle and probably trying to survive.
And I
Is
think
that,
another theme is also, sorry if I'm cutting someone off here, that the things we do to each other, and especially the things we do to those with no power, it can be kids, but it can also be, vulnerable people, maybe especially women. So the things we do may be unintentional, sometimes intentional, that will hurt them forever or stay with them forever. I think a lot of the stories also circle around that.
any last comments? My last question, of course, is it relatable? It's contemporary Danish. It's different in the way that maybe the cultural depictions, I mean, here, I don't know if you found them abrasive, cruel, as you said, very harsh, and lots of swear words and lots of, I mean, the F word, as you know, is the most common word in Danish, so no surprise there. But it's just that, is this something you, in this different culture here, can relate to? Or do you find it just over the top? Well, appalling?
I found it over the top.
It's
I mean,
harsh, very
First of all,
harsh.
when they tied up the dog to the tree, that was it for me.
Yeah.
I thought, oh God, how far is this? And then
Yeah.
the boy screwing a sheep. I thought,
Yes.
oh my God, what
Yes.
next?
Yes, yes.
I found
But I want
everybody was young, really, really young. And I just wanted to hear that finally there was an older character in Wounds, but everybody else seemed very, very young, very immature, very blasé and, well, self-centered. And but I didn't find anybody I liked hardly. I mean, until we got to Wounds.
I'm not sure though that I think I'm not sure I think that it's uniquely Danish, modern Danish or contemporary Danish culture. I think it's that, and somebody used these exact words, that these things happen and we just don't talk about them. It's like, I live in this, in Palm Springs, which sounds like a beautiful resort, and it is, and we also have a really bad homeless problem. And so we look at the beautiful mountains that surround us, not the person who's literally sleeping in the parking lot. And somebody used the phrase, these things aren't talked about here. And I learned that phrase in Danish through Duolingo. It's like a set phrase, apparently. And maybe that's the part that's Danish, is we don't talk about those things. And to say you don't talk about them acknowledges them
Yep.
at the
So
same
that's-
time.
And that's actually what we do at dinner parties, right? Needed. I do it all the time because I am who I am, but I'm told by my mother-in-law, we don't talk about that, right? And I'm just have to say, Nita, I find it fascinating that you say it's contemporary because this book is almost 20 years old, right? But it reads very contemporary.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love it, but I'm apparently not Americanized enough yet.
I do too, Desiree. So you and I are in a little club. And
I love it. I mean, I find it, I love that harshness. I love the way she writes. I love that like you said, Brady, like you have to be on your toes to follow, like, because she's tricking you if you are not constantly like trying to figure out what's going on. And I don't know, I love the rawness of it. Like you kind of have your heart right here and it's heartbreaking. And I guess I love that part that it's so hard to read, but it's also so important, I think.
What I found incredible was that it took the translator 3 years to translate this, and that she actually went and lived for a summer in Copenhagen with the author so that she could get the words right. And I just can't imagine. What's that?
Who's the translator?
This Denise Newman, and that's, I think that's what the Penn Literary Award was for actually the translation of this, not the story itself, but it was the translation. And maybe that has something to do with it, that she was really trying to capture that, I say, uncomfortableness in reading these things. It makes you uncomfortable. Most of the time we read things that give us pleasure and comfort, and this ain't that.
I thought it was relatable. I thought it was beyond what I could relate to, but there were so many characters in this book who would come out and kind of be in a situation, and I would go, I've been there. It wasn't that crazy, but I've been there, until I came to the story about conference. And then I thought it was written about me. So I do think that there are some really very relatable things about humans in this book, and maybe they go beyond what we can, we're comfortable with, but I also think they're very human.
Thank you, everybody. Suzanne, you want to finish?
I'm interested in knowing how old she was when she came from Greenland, and how much that influences her life there.
And you'll have to wait for the interview, because they really are very kind of dispersed with their information about her. So that's what we will find out. But next month. Yes, please. Next month.
I think also I started to read the When Death Takes Someone From You.
Oh yeah.
And I mean, I will continue reading that. It's so different. And I think it's a very good counterpoint to this.
Yeah, and it's very profound in so many ways. And it made me cry all the time. So that's hard. But anyway.
This one is good too. If you like her, this one is really good too. And it's in English as well, right, Nita? I think it's English.
Rock, scissors, paper.
Yeah, it's really good.
So anyway, just go find it. I just am going to make a little, kind of advertisement for the next book, because it's again a different genre, because it's a memoir. So we are reading a book called Anger Is My Middle Name. And this woman has written about her own experiences and her own struggles and so on. And I saw her that she did a Danish talk, Zebio it's called, where she talked for half an hour about something else, another issue in her life. So she's obviously one of those people focusing on herself, trying to also write something that's relatable and helpful for others. So again, we're doing some experimentation. And of course, our last book is from Greenland. So we've definitely tried to go around the world in a circle and not in a triangle.
Can I say something? If anyone has, I read the book when it came out, Lisbeth Zornig Andersen, Anger Is My Name. When it came out, I read it and I emailed her because I was so that book is pretty amazing, I think.
Amazing.
And I'm interested in talking to her about resilience theory. And if anyone here has any questions that they would like me to propose to her, because I'm working on securing that interview, email me with anything, and I'm happy to bring that into the conversation as well. Or it doesn't have to be around resilience theory. That's just like one of the things I'm interested in. It can be anything that you would like me to bring forward. I will be happy to do that.
And Anders Eggers interviews her brother on one of his shows where he's exploring the drugs in Denmark, and specifically Copenhagen. And then the brother meets with her and they have a discussion. So.
And if you feel you know Anders Eggers from a
Yeah.
book we read, that name was, right, Stine Pilgaard?
Yeah.
Yeah, he was in there.
Yeah.
All right, everybody. Thank you so much for coming and showing up and
Thank you.
reading the book. Wonderful thoughts. And I'll see you, I hope, in a month.